Good evening, everyone. What an exciting day it has been. Wonderful to see NASA's rover Perseverance successfully landing on Mars. As we celebrate human scientific and technological achievement, let us not forget that we have the power to transform not just the outer world, but our inner worlds too. And that brings me to our distinguished speaker and his talk today. Before introducing Marc Brackett, our speaker for this evening, I first wanted to recognize the generosity of Mr. and Mrs. Richard and Barbara Franke, whose support has enabled us to bring you these exciting talks and discussions. May I request everyone to mute, please? I'm absolutely delighted to see that they are here today. And I just wanted to formally remind you that since we are recording this event, I would like to request all of you to mute your videos. And we will have a brief Q&A following the talk. And I would like you to kindly submit your questions onto the chat. And Dr. Ty Camp will pass on your questions and manage the Q&A. Now to our speaker this evening. It is my absolute pleasure to introduce one of our own colleagues, Marc Brackett. Marc is the founding director of the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence and a professor in the Child Study Center and at the Yale School of Medicine. His research has focused on some of the very, very big questions, like the role of emotions and emotional intelligence in learning, decision-making, creativity, relationship quality, and mental health. And he's also thought a lot about the measurement of emotional intelligence and the influences that emotional intelligence training has on the health and performance, particularly workplace performance and climate for adults, as well as the importance of this training for young minds. He has published hundreds of scholarly articles, has awarded many recipient of many awards, including the Joseph Zins Award for his research on social and emotional learning. He also has an honorary doctorate from Manhattanville College. He's a distinguished scientist on the National Commission on Social, Emotional, and Academic Development and on the board of directors of the Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning. So at this time, while we are all in this pandemic and worrying about our sense of isolation, I think a lot of his work will resonate and would be extremely useful and enlightening for all of us. He's the lead developer of Ruler, a systemic evidence-based approach to social and emotional learning that has been adopted by over 2,000 schools, preschool through high schools across the United States and in many other countries, including Australia, China, England, Italy, Mexico, and Spain. So what is really interesting about Ruler is that it infuses social and emotional learning into what he refers to as the immune system of schools by enhancing how school administrators lead, how educators teach, students learn, and families parent. So taking care of the full ecosystem of integrating this very important kind of intelligence that has not been recognized sufficiently, or at least as important as it actually is. And research has shown that this Ruler boosts academic performance, decreases school problems like bullying, enriches classroom climates, and reduces teacher stress and burnout. So before further, look, I could go on and on. Marc is extremely distinguished. The work that he has done is so relevant and so timely, and I am so enthusiastic about it that I could go on and on. But today, he's going to be talking to us on his recent book called Permission to Feel, Unlocking the Power of Emotions to Help Our Kids, Ourselves, and Our Society, which was released just a couple of years ago. And before I turn it over to him, I just wanted to mention a couple of upcoming talks. We have the physicist and philosopher Carlo Rovelli speaking on February 26th and 27th as part of a new series that we are starting on understanding the nature of inference. So this is a new project that I've started as part of the Frankie program, a multidisciplinary exploration of the nature of inference. And then we have on March 1st, Susan Hockfield, who will be speaking in the give us a distinguished speaker talk at 4 p.m. as well. And as you all know, Susan Hockfield is a former provost of Yale and emeritus president of MIT. So please keep an eye out for our mailings and join our mailing list if you'd like personal intimation of our events. And to close, I wanted to mention that our ongoing Learning by Doing project is something that to solicit simple science experiments for kids to do. So I invite all of you to consider submitting ideas for this. And with that, I would like to turn it over to Marc. Marc, welcome. And thank you so much for agreeing to give this, this talk.
Thank you, Priya. It's a pleasure to be here. Welcome, everybody. It's 4:15 Eastern time on a Thursday, and you're all signed up to hear some guy from Connecticut talk about feelings. I think that's a good thing, right? What do you think, Priya?
Yeah, I think it's a fantastic thing. It also tells you.
Before everybody logged in, you were sharing like some big news that was actually kind of fascinating. Do you mind just sharing a little bit about that?
Sure. So NASA just landed a rover successfully on the surface of Mars. It's called Perseverance. And it was sort of a complicated maneuver to actually land it. And so it's been a great success. It is happening in real time. We have not yet gotten actual images, but we know that the landing was a success. And, this is a very difficult, Mars has been very, very difficult. Many countries have tried to land and failed, including India a few years ago. So.
Awesome. Well, I was saying to Priya and team, like, I don't know if I can beat that one in my presentation today, but anyhow.
I don't think there's a competition between the inner world and the outer world, as I said. They're both equally important.
I appreciate that. Thank you. I just need to be able to use my screen. Someone, can you enable me, please? Awesome. Thank you. All right, you should be, can you see?
Yes.
Do you see the screen?
Yeah.
Great. So thank you for the introduction, Priya and team. I wanted to just start off by saying that emotional intelligence has a special place at Yale University. Some of you know that Peter Salovey, the president of Yale, was the founder of the theory of emotional intelligence back in 1990. He and my doctoral advisor, Jack Mayer, wrote a theory that no one really heard of, because when two academics write a scholarly article, not a lot of people in the real world read it. But I was one of the people who got a chance to read it, and so were some other people. And the term got quite popularized in the mid-1990s. And once that happened, the field really took off. In terms of measurement, in terms of training, in terms of thinking about its application to schools and homes and workplaces. And so what I'm going to share with you today is a little bit about the work that we do at the Center for Emotional Intelligence that primarily focuses on education context. And so I'm excited to share that with you. And I'm going to focus specifically, Priya invited me to talk about my book called Permission to Feel, which is essentially a summary of the 25 years of my running around the United States and other countries trying to understand why people are a little bit reluctant to talk about their feelings and what are the skills that help us to use our emotions wisely. So here we go. I like to start with quotes, and I think that many of us have been through multiple pandemics. We've experienced the coronavirus for the last almost year. We've seen fires burning homes in California and other places. We have been made more aware of systemic racism, both here at our own university, in this country, worldwide. And the list goes on, I think, in terms of the traumas that many people have experienced. And I call myself a chronic kind of slight neurotic optimist. And so I chose this quote for today. And once the storm is over, you won't remember how you made it through, how you managed to survive. You won't even be sure whether the storm is really over. But one thing is certain: when you come out of the storm, you won't be the same person who walked in. And that is by Haruki Murakami. So I want to make this interactive. And and what I'd love to do is just get people to share. When you think about that quote, when you see that quote, what does it make you think about? If you can all just get on your interaction hats, that would be great.
Yes, please feel free to type in the chat and we can read that out. So there's a comment from Simone who says, I can get to really be present. Makes her aware of the present. We have a request to put the quote back up again.
Yes, of course. I thought it was still there. Sorry.
Elizabeth points out that we become fundamentally changed by our experiences, and Chris refers to the suffering in Texas right now.
Yeah.
And Hedda talks about learning more about herself, strengths and weaknesses. And John Donatich mentions that the belief that the self is adaptable and ever changing.
Nice.
A couple of people have echoed that feeling.
Thank you, Priya. One of the things that I want to share that I learned over the last 10 months is around gratitude. Oftentimes we think of gratitude like it's a bit cliche these days, right? We're told to write a gratitude journal. We're told, you should be grateful. And certainly it's important. But what I was surprised by in a study that I ran over the summer, I did a study by myself. I was just really curious, and I ran it with about 1,000 participants. And I asked people across the United States to describe the things for which they're grateful. And what we found in the study was that people said my family, my finances, my security, that I have food, all kind of the basics that you might think of. But one thing that stood out to me as not being present on people's lists was things like the grocery store clerks, the nurses and doctors that are putting their lives at risk, the teachers who are suffering, in terms of working from home and having to or go to school and put themselves at risk. And so for me, one of my takeaways, from the pandemic is just about gratitude. When I go now grocery shopping, when I see a nurse or a doctor, when I see a first responder, when I see someone who's delivering a package, I just think about, my goodness, I have the privilege to work from home and I have that safety, whereas many people don't. And I think all of us have learned something from this pandemic for sure. That was just my one takeaway. Now, this talk is about emotional intelligence, and I would be doing a weird job if I didn't ask you how you were feeling. So at the Center for Emotional Intelligence, we use a tool we call the mood meter, and it's based in science that essentially asserts that how we feel is a product of two core dimensions of what's called affect, our appraisal and our arousal or our activation levels. So on the x-axis, it asks you to think about your pleasantness right now. From -5, like, this is the worst experience of my life, to +5, oh my goodness, I'm taking an hour out of my day to just sit and think about emotion. So just take a moment and think about where you're at on pleasantness. On the y-axis, it says the word energy. Literally, think about your physiology right now. Do you feel like your body is well rested and that you've got lots of energy? Or do you feel like you just want to jump into bed and pull the covers over your head? So what's your body telling you right now? Energized or depleted? Then we cross our two axes to create our medidor emocional, our mood meter: yellow, red, blue, and green. So take a moment and think about, what color are you in today? Can everyone please do that? Let's go into our chat box and just, what's the color that represents your current emotion state? Yellows, greens.
We have a lot of yellows.
Todd, you can share it if you like.
Yeah, sure. We see a lot of yellows, some greens. We have a blue, orange, yellow. Some Priya's a yellow. And a bunch more greens, mostly green and yellow, I'd say.
Cool. So maybe this is like a special day, because the research that I've done over the last couple of months would not indicate that there are a lot of people in the yellow and green, but I'm going to take what I can get today. What I'd like you to do right now is convert your color to a specific feeling word. What would be the exact word that you would use to describe how you're feeling right now? Ready? You have 3 seconds to write that word. 3, 2, 1. Curious, relaxed, content, peaceful, tired, thrilled. Okay. Mellow, hopeful. Okay. Silly, irritated, curious. Hopeful. Just give me a yes or no in the chat box quickly. How many of you found it a little difficult to go from the broad quadrant to like that specific word? So mostly yeses. Any hypotheses around that? I mean, what might be the reason that it is moderately difficult to articulate? Words are not specific enough, cognitive dissonance, feeling more than one thing, not easy to name our feelings, not used to practicing it, lack of vocabulary. There are fewer words in squares. Nico, there are over 2,000 words. Actually, in a new study that we ran, we found 16,000 words, feeling words. But most of us use what? 2. Fine. Okay. Whatever. Here's your cheat sheet, by the way. So this is in the inside cover of my book. It's the mood meter with the words. We give you the first 100 as a practice, to just build that vocabulary, that basic vocabulary. And you can see here there are nuances in terms of building that self-awareness, that emotion language. Now, what I'd like you to do for the next minute or so is take a moment and think about the strategy that you think is going to best serve you to get the most out of today. So many of you said you were in the yellow and green. And my question for you is, what might be the strategy that would help you stay there? Because probably being in the deep red, if you were enraged or having, feelings of panic, you probably would have difficulty concentrating. If you're in the deep blue, you might be worrying or thinking about, the support you need, which is okay, but not the best for learning. So what might be your strategy? Where does curious learner mode live? I think that's kind of motivated, focused, engaged. What do you think, Laura? You're going to be open, pay attention. How many of you, if you have children who've had like complete kind of meltdowns during the pandemic, when your kid is having a meltdown, you say, come on, honey, just be open, or come on, just pay attention. Cristal is away from the kids, so that's your strategy, is giving yourself some space away from the kids. Other strategies? Breathe, listen. Same thing. Are you going to just tell your kids, just breathe, just listen? Happiness is a choice. Focus. It's tough. Let me get a raise of hands. Everyone know how to raise their hands in Zoom? Yeah. Give me a quick raise of hands if, over the last 9 months, you have struggled at some point or another with regulating your own feelings. Okay, a lot of people. Let me ask you another question. How many of you have struggled, raise your hands again, with dealing with other people's feelings? Okay, so we're all in the same boat pretty much. What our research shows at the center is the following, that a lot of people are experiencing some pretty intense emotions right now. From over the last 9 months, I think we studied well over 30,000 people. And what we found continuously is anxiety is the #1 emotion that people report feeling. When we ask them, well, how do you want to feel? We find very different emotions during different times. So over the summer, for example, we asked a couple thousand teachers and they said, we want to be excited. And then we asked them in the fall and they said, no, forget about excitement. We just want to be appreciated and valued and supported. And so what we have here are interesting phenomena. We've got our emotion state, the one that we're feeling. And then we have our, what we might call ideal affect or our hoped for emotion state. And oftentimes there's a big discrepancy between the two. And so that leads us to think about what's the goal here? Is the goal to go from that red and blue and just be in the yellow and green? What do you think? If I were to ask you, what is the goal? Like, what are we supposed to do with all of our feelings? What would you say? What would you say? Share and be patient, accept them, don't get stuck in any one feeling, share in order to grow, recognize them, be aware, understand them, accept them. I think all of you are doing pretty well here. Strive for has, but remember the weather changes. Okay. Well, one thing that I want to get to today is that there's a difficult challenge we have with this idea of striving for happiness. The founding documents of our country, right, are the report that we have to pursue happiness. A colleague who was here at Yale, June Gruber, who used to study, we used to do some research together, did some research on the dark side of happiness, that when we strive daily, like we have this kind of goal to be happy all the time, it can lead to a lot of disappointment. Think about that. You're bound to be disappointed if every day you're trying to be happy. I don't know about you, but like that's really hard for me. Anyone relate to that? That this striving for happiness can actually backfire? Does that resonate? And so maybe we need to think about it a little differently. Actually, I just did an hour-and-a-half session today with this group on toxic positivity. This idea of like always having to show up being happy and on. And you can imagine when you're a boss or a parent or a teacher, always like demonstrating that you're in a good mood or feeling optimistic and positive, how that might just rub people the wrong way. But it also, what does that do for the children that we are raising and teaching? It makes them think like the only emotion that matters is happiness, which probably is not what we want. So the vision of the Center for Emotional Intelligence is to use the power of emotions to create a healthier and more innovative and compassionate society. I argue in my most recent book that it starts with ourselves and giving everyone else this concept of permission to feel. And I think a lot of you actually, when I asked you about what the goal is, you intuitively got to this point. So here I am asking you right now, in whatever role you have in life, a student, a mom, a dad, a professor, multiple, you can be all those roles. When you think about the concept of permission to feel, what does it make you think about? And just take a moment and jot down your ideas. Vulnerability, free will, permission to stop feeling sometimes, not being lawyerly. I actually did a talk for the general counsel's office here years ago, and one lawyer said to me, there's no feelings in law. Let go of our emotions, being human. No need to have to explain yourself all the time. Vulnerability. How many of you feel that in your current role, that you have the freedom to be your true, full feeling self? Or how many of you feel like there are times when actually you need to kind of fake it, or you can't actually express your honest feelings? So many of us, right? Because these concepts don't live only within us as individuals. These are concepts that live in homes, in schools, in workplaces, in communities. And so one of the other things that we have to think about is, do we have a permission to feel culture and climate in our homes, schools, and workplaces? Now, I've asked a lot of people, and you're right, Clara, it depends on the situation and the emotion. So over the last year, I've done, I don't know, a couple hundred presentations, a couple years, and I've asked literally tens of thousands of people, and I've compiled the data. When you think of this permission to feel, what are the characteristics? And what we find is that people say compassionate, empathic, non-judgmental, supportive, unconditional love, patient, supportive. So I wonder, A, how many of you are these things for yourself right now? Self-compassionate, being vulnerable even with yourself, showing self-care and empathy, being non-judgmental of your own feelings. How many of you feel like, you know, something, I could use some work in this area? Anyone feel like they could use some work? And how about with other people? Especially when you're experiencing strong, unpleasant feelings. It's hard to be compassionate, empathic, non-judgmental, supportive when you're activated, isn't it? Now, what I want to jump to is the science around this. So we know from interviewing people that there are multiple components of giving oneself permission to feel. But we're at Yale University, and you know, I've done my share of presentations in different departments, and I must say that some people, you know, they're like, enough, you know, Mark, we like your stories, we like the anecdotes, but you know, what's the science? And you know, as Priya told you, we don't just talk about these things, we do rigorous research. And I oftentimes tell people, and I think this is the danger in a lot of our fields, especially in applied psychology, is that people always ask me, so Mark, what's your opinion about something? And I always tell people, like, you know, I'm fine, you know, sharing my opinion. But what you really want to know is, what is the science behind what I'm speaking about? So when I talk about emotion regulation, it's not what matters is my opinion. What matters is what the data show or what the science shows in terms of what works for people in supporting them and managing their feelings. And so I think what's most important for all of you to understand is, A, we should be blessed that we have a president at Yale who took all of the kind of science from the 1930s and 40s and 50s and 60s and 70s and 80s and compiled it into a comprehensive theory and made it public that there is a way to be smart about our feelings, that emotions are not disruptive, they're information. And that they matter for 5 really important reasons. The first is attention, memory, and learning. Think about it. If you're bored right now with my presentation, you're doing something else. You're not paying attention because your emotions are driving your attentional capacity. My friend Mary Helen Imordino Yang, she's a neuroscientist, she goes, we learn what we care about, which means that this is also a relational experience. Like, I am in many ways co-regulating your experience right now. Because if I talk like this for an hour and I just said emotions matter and I just had a really like kind of bored facial expression and really monotone voice, how many of you would log off? Somebody's laughing behind the scenes. Right? You'd be like, you may stay on out of respect for whatever bizarre reason, but you would be like, oh my goodness, I can't take it. When am I going to lose it? Has anyone ever had a class like that where you're like, the content is something you're passionate about, but the presentation is like, ugh. Has anyone ever had that? It's like, it's painful, isn't it? And so what this tells us is that emotions are what? They're relational experiences. Decision-making. How we feel influences the choices we make. Relationship quality. We say in our center that emotions are signals to approach or avoid. Has anyone here ever worked with someone or lived with someone who is very difficult? Like just difficult to be with? And how many of you, when you worked for that person or lived with that person, would say to yourself, gosh, I can't wait to spend more time with them today. No, you wake up and then when you're like, oh, can't believe I have to deal with this. Oh, do I have to say hello? Or at work, you look at them and you're like, oh, I'm gonna go the other way. Because again, think about this co-regulatory process. We look at other people's facial expressions, we have memories of the way they've treated us, and they create activation levels within us. Physical and mental health. One of the studies we did showed that literally how we feel in terms of the culture and climate of our organization influences our own stress levels, which influences our physical health, like sleep problems, our body mass index, which is an indicator of body fat. And then finally, performance and creativity. One of our scientists, her name is Zorana, she studies the link between emotions and creativity, and she says emotions are the fuel to creativity, but it's our emotional intelligence that helps us make that creative process an actual product. And this always reminds me of being a professor here at Yale, where all of my students have amazing grade point averages, and they all have high test scores, SAT scores, GREs for graduate school. And then you would think, well, okay, if academic ability is the driver of success, then everyone here should end up being highly successful because the range is so tight. But it's the exact reason why that doesn't matter. When you have a restriction of range of a construct, it can no longer predict outcomes. So like basketball, everyone who is on a basketball team, I mean, from what I gather, is really tall. Like, I don't think I'm 5'8" and like 8.25. So like, they're not picking me to be on any basketball team. I can't even, I'm not going to get into that. But so height, right, no longer really is a predictor of success in basketball. Just like at Yale, IQ, GPA, test scores is no longer a predictive variable. Does this resonate with people? That means there has to be other things, other attributes of who we are that contribute to our success. And what I'm arguing, of course, and have the evidence for, is that a big part of that is our emotional intelligence. So my question for all of you is, do you see yourself as an emotion scientist or an emotion judge? Are you curious? Are you an explorer? Are you reflective? Do you want to get specific? Or do you see yourself as more of like, you know what? I don't really talk about feelings. They kind of like, they get in the way. I had a teacher last year say to me, I check my emotions at the door. Emotions I have to just put them in a box and leave them outside. How many of you feel like you can check your emotions at the door before you go home when you used to like go to work really? Or when you're having a difficult morning, how many of you are like, I'm just going to check my emotions, I'm going to leave them in my car before I go into my office? It doesn't really work that way. Just our brains don't operate. We can't pull out the emotion center. It just doesn't work that way. When you fail at dealing with your feelings, like many of you say you have, what do you say to yourself? Let me ask you that right now. Be honest, when you like really mess up and you say something that you regret, or you eat something you don't want to eat, or you just engage in a behavior that you didn't want to engage in because you were upset. You yelled, you screamed, you ignored. What is the dialogue that you have with yourself? I'm a bad person. I'm so stupid. I screwed up. I'm so much of a fixed mindset, right? That emotion judge, right? And so one of the things that we try to help people with is understand A, our emotions are ephemeral, and B, that we are continuous learners. And that's more of a growth mindset around it. You fail, it's like, okay, I can apologize, I can forgive, I can learn more, and I can do better next time. And so that's basically getting at that these are hard skills. Oftentimes emotions are thought about as soft skills. Does that resonate with you? People think of it as soft science or soft skills, which by the way, makes me crazy since my whole career is as an emotion scientist. But nevertheless, that's the mindset. And I always joke around, having been at Yale now for 20 years. Has anyone here at Yale ever met someone who was really smart but not emotionally skilled? And you don't have to, please don't write that person's name in the chat. So that leads us to bringing in the skills. So what are the underlying skills? RULER is the acronym that we use. Recognizing emotions in self and others. Understanding the causes and consequences. Labeling emotions accurately, having the words, knowing how and when to express our feelings, having the strategies to regulate them. So self-awareness and other awareness, the ability to manage one's own emotions, the ability to help others in managing theirs. So I did a talk a couple times ago for a bunch of leaders, and I asked them, what's the psychological difference between stressed, overwhelmed, anxious? Anyone want to take a stab at that? Stressed, overwhelmed, anxious. What's the difference? Level of intensity, they're the same. Under the judgment, different way of expressing. So what I'm trying to get at with our work is the granularity in terms of these differences. So let me share what I mean. Stressed. When you're stressed, think about it. Stress has to do with having a lot of demands, but feeling like you just don't have the resources to fulfill those demands. Anxiety is this perception that there's a lot of uncertainty around the future. Like, for example, vaccinations, like some of us are waiting. We don't know when it's going to happen. There's uncertainty around that. We don't know what the new strain of the virus, is that going to mess things up even more? That's what puts us in anxiety. That isn't really, it's not stress, that's actual anxiety. Overwhelmed is when you're overcome by your emotions. When you just feel like you have so much on your plate, you just can't breathe, you can't take it anymore. Do people see the differences? Does that resonate with you? Now the question is, does it matter? Does it matter? Would it matter for us to be able to be granular? So I ask you why? Why would that matter? Seriously, why does it matter? Helps us manage better. Yeah. There's a saying that we have, you have to name it to tame it. You got to label it to regulate it. And think about it, if you're working with someone who you're looking at them in terms of their behavior. So let's just try this right now very quick. I'm going to stop sharing. So imagine I come into your office, I'm a colleague of yours, and I'm like, I can't take it anymore. Okay. So you're laughing at me. Thanks a lot. All right. So how am I feeling? Angry.
Sorry, how are you feeling if somebody comes in?
No, how am I feeling? What is my,
okay.
What is the feeling that I'm having? I can't take it
Overwhelmed.
anymore.
Overwhelmed. Yes.
So what happened just then and there? Did you become the emotion scientist or the emotion judge? And why did you become the judge? Because you attributed emotion to me. You made an assumption that my behavior meant something in terms of anger, frustration, whatever it might be. And so it's a big deal in our work that in order to really know how someone is feeling, A, you have to ask them, and B, they have to tell you, and that means they have to be comfortable and feel safe to do so. And we oftentimes grossly make mistakes. We make big mistakes when we're judging someone by their behavior. We have stereotypes, we have racial stereotypes, we have gender stereotypes, we've got, endless kinds of stereotypes, power stereotypes. And so when we are observing behavior and we activate stereotypic information, we're automatically biased in our interpretation of others. Does this resonate with everybody?
Yes, but Mark, I had a quick question, if I may.
Sure.
If part of the problem is that we are not able to even personally articulate how we are feeling, as we saw, isn't that like the first fundamental layer of the problem? That
it is. And
We
so
can't
you've got to
say-
have the language
Hmm.
in order to describe feelings, because that's the only way we know how to communicate in this world. And then you have to use that language, understand the reasons for those different feeling states, like anger is around injustice, and disappointment is around unmet expectations. Then you've got to be able to notice it in others. You got to confirm that that's how they're actually feeling, because you can't just, if I hate you, right, I can't take it. You think I'm angry, but it could be that I'm feeling shame. I can tell you in my childhood, because I had some serious bullying in my childhood, I would come home like angry, displaying a lot of anger, but I was feeling a lot of shame and fear. And my parents constantly misperceived me as being angry, and then I got in trouble and I got punished.
Hmm.
And no one really supported me because I was actually feeling much deeper emotions like shame. So yes, it's self-awareness, building the language, understanding the strategies, and then building relationships, giving other people their permission to feel,
Right.
being that emotion scientist with them, and then using that wisely. So
Right.
good question, Priya.
Yeah. And then part of this masquerading of, don't we often do that even as a way to cope? Like we map something that is much like you mentioned in your example. You map something that's much more intense, that is shame, into something else, which is anger, right? So
Yeah.
doesn't that serve a purpose for us personally? We do that intentionally, don't we?
Well, I think we do it because as a society, we have deemed that shame is a weak emotion.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's certainly not beneficial, right? Because we're not going to get the supports that we need to manage the true feeling if we mask it with another one. A lot of work we got to do here, Priya.
Oh, thank you very much. Yeah.
Yeah. So I just wanted to share a couple more slides. One is on a study that we did on emotional intelligence and supervisor. I know it's a typo. This is a study where we looked at supervisor emotional intelligence, high and low, and then different aspects of employees. So skill acquisition, people feel like they're more likely to acquire skills when they have a supervisor who is higher in emotional intelligence, much fewer turnover intentions, much greater job satisfaction, less burnout, slightly more engagement, less fearful of speaking up. There was actual more ethics in a culture, in a organization with a supervisor who is higher in emotional intelligence. So the last thing I'll share with you today, and then we can take some questions, is that right now during the pandemic, especially, people have been, asking us, what are the strategies to take care of ourselves, to take care of other people? And I'll just end by saying the first is this concept of permission to feel. Then we've got to help ourselves regulate those feelings, right? We've got to maybe take that breath. We also have to do some physical self-care, like making sure that we get enough sleep and eat nutritious foods and move as much as possible. We have the psychological self-care, taking time to be still and just doing some fun things. Social connection, we know, is a big one right now because we have a pandemic of loneliness as well. So how do you remain connected in this strange, socially distant world? Cognitive strategies. The big one that we focus on in our work is self-talk. How many of us have that negative self-talk, that automatic habitual way of being a self-critic as opposed to someone who's self-compassionate? And then routines in terms of setting yourself up for success. So I thought maybe we can just do one little exercise, and maybe we can just do a little breathing exercise to bring ourselves into the present moment. Maybe just take a nice long inhale and an exhale. Just bring ourselves in, kind of digest this information. And I'll just wrap up by sharing a few last things. So Ruler, you heard in my intro, is our center's approach to teaching social and emotional learning. Our goal is to get away from piecemeal approaches to more systemic models. And we have a theory of change. And I just want to say that one of the things that we're trying to do in our work is get people away from the quick fix mentality. So like, here's your emotional intelligence workshop. Good luck. This is hard work. I can tell you, as someone who's studied this and practiced it for 20 years, I'm still 25 years, 30 years. we got to move away from like the one size fits all thing. Like mindfulness has become very popular now. It's very positive and useful, but at the same time, some people don't benefit from that. They like other strategies. We have to think about this not from an individual's perspective, but from our team at work, our entire department. And we're doing this at the Child Studies Center right now. We've had some challenges over the last 7 months in multiple domains, from people's experiences of racism to people feeling disconnected. And the only way to get through this is to take a systemic approach. It's not about pulling someone out and giving them some training. It really is about shifting the culture and climate of the organization. And that means that we have to think about this as a university. It means we have to think about this in terms of the policies that govern our country. So for example, detaining children at borders probably is not good for their healthy development. So how do we inform policymakers, right, about the principles of healthy emotional development? And so from the micro level to the macro level, we have an app that we call the Mood Meter app. I'm very excited. One of our Yale graduates, his name is Ben Silberman, who is the founder of Pinterest, is supporting our center in the work. And we're building out a new app that's going to be like just incredible. So excited about it. It'll have multiple features. This is our beta version. So if you're interested in plotting your emotions over time, you can download that. And let me wrap up, and then we'll take just a few questions. First, you got to evaluate your routines. Is your day working for you? Try to be a preventionist. Surround yourself with people who are calming. I can't tell you the power of the presence of someone who can bring your systemic, your nervous system levels down, your sympathetic arousal down. Be aware of emotional contagion. It works for both pleasant and unpleasant emotions. So a stressed out parent is a stressed out home, a stressed out boss is a stressed out workplace. And so we have to monitor those feelings. I say be an Uncle Marvin. That was the person who was my hero in life. That presence of someone caring, as I mentioned. Think about positive empathy in addition to traditional empathy. Positive empathy is just showing that you care to someone else, giving a compliment, not a fake compliment, a real one. And you won't believe how far that will go in terms of shifting their biochemicals. Maybe consider your best self. How do you want to be seen and talked about and experienced? Lastly, as you know, my work is about emotion. I'm arguing, and I'll argue this until the end of time, that it starts with giving ourselves and others the permission to be our full feeling selves. There's no such thing as a bad emotion. People have deemed that anxiety is bad and happiness is good. That's not a healthy way of thinking about it. All emotions are experiences, they're information. Strive to be that emotion scientist, not the judge. Remember, it's about using our emotions wisely. I think we have to appreciate that this domain of intelligence operates and functions differently than traditional cognitive abilities. It's much harder, as we have seen in the pandemic. The levels of anxiety and depression have been higher than we've seen in decades, which means that it's demonstrating that it's hard to apply these skills, when the sand unfortunately gets kicked in your face. And so we have to be mindful of that, and I think be more prevention focused, as I said earlier. Maybe be the role model for your family and your friends and your colleagues. Be open to apologizing and forgiving and repairing, getting the help that you might need. Focus on systemic change. And I like to end in lofty ways, just because that's the way I operate. I have a lot of hope for this work. I think that we're finally, as a nation, taking seriously this other side of the report card. Still, we have another couple decades to infuse it into the immune system of our nation. But going back to the center's mission and vision, I think if we take seriously our own and others' emotion skills, we can build a healthier and more equitable, innovative, and compassionate society. And as I run around the world, or I used to anyway, and visiting schools, for example, here in Connecticut, some of the most high poverty areas, I always ask myself, will this child have the opportunities and learn the knowledge and the skills to achieve their dreams? And I'm still not convinced, that we're there yet. And so I'll end by saying, it's really our moral obligation to take seriously our emotional lives and the emotional lives of others. And I hope that this was enjoyable. And let's take a couple minutes of questions. Thank you. And if you want more information, oops, let me just skip that. It was a X. That's the name of my book. It's Permission to Feel. My website is where you can go to learn more about the book, and also has links to our center and also to our school-based curriculum. So you can just go there, and then it'll drive you to other resources. And on that note, thank you.
First question, Mark. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Mark. That was wonderful. And Ty, did you want to go ahead and handle the questions so that people have a chance to ask? That was absolutely fantastic. With I wish we could have had you for many more hours for sort of more detailed session. This is, I think, even this recognition that you are offering us is just so important right now, especially. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I will defer now to Ty to handle the questions.
Sure. First question from the chat. Thank you. And thank you, Mark. Why would engagement with both a high-low supervisor emotional intelligence be so close on that graph? Seems like a low emotional intelligence supervisor would be discouraging to be engaged.
It's a good question. And so I'm not 100% certain, but what I would say is that it just might be that for most people, if they are like they care or they're interested in their actual workload and whatever their job is, that it's less affected. It's slightly affected. But I think, and maybe people like to see themselves as being engaged in their work, and there's a little bit of method problems there. But what I think is more interesting is, or not more interesting, but I would say relevant, is that engagement can also, we found in another study that engagement and burnout are not inversely related, that there are people who are highly engaged and also highly burnt out. About 20 to 25% of the US workforce reports that. And what we find is that those people they're doing their work, but deep inside they're really burnt and they're looking for other jobs. And so that engagement can be masked also with burnout.
Another question, you so insightfully talked about the necessity of being able to properly name our emotions. What to do then with children, especially young children, because we want to start them as parents at a young age on the path to emotional intelligence. So what are some of your recommendations for parents and dealing with young children?
Yeah, so I don't know, I'm embarrassing to plug my book, but that's a lot of my book is about.
I'll get it.
But just to give you like the basics is you got to be the role model. You have to be a parent who is not going to be that toxically positive parent that's daddy's great or mommy's great. Everything's fine, right? A lot of people, we just desperately want our kids to be happy all the time. And so we fake how we're feeling and we try to convince our kids that they're happier than they actually are. And I think that that's a disservice to kids when they're having their feelings. The best thing they do is to validate those feelings and help them label them properly, and then find out, what they need to support them in managing that feeling. And then you'll have kids who have greater well-being. They won't necessarily be happy all the time, but I think the goal for well-being might be actually better than the goal for happiness.
And is that what your Uncle Marvin did? Was that the side of the story?
That's it. He was like, gosh, you're being bullied. You've had terrible trauma in your life. Like, it's understandable. Let's talk about it, as opposed to let's ignore it, try to get rid of it.
Wow. Empowering. Okay.
Should we do one more?
Yep. Just going through the chat here. All participants are welcome to put questions in the chat. A lot of compliments on how well received your talk was.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay.
That's cool, Susan. Well, thank you for sharing. Yep. Glad to see that you're doing ruler. Well, Ty, thank you.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Mark, for this wonderful.
Hey, Rob. Just so you know, this Rob who is on, I'm outing him, but Rob and I were roommates in college. So that's 30 2 years ago, Rob.
Oh.
Um,
Yeah, thanks for the reminder. Great job, Mark.
Thanks, Rob. Good to see you.
Thank you. Thank you
All right.
very much.
Take care, everybody.
Thanks so much. Thanks, Mark. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.